Hello, welcome to Board Game Bonkers. I'm Jay Sears, and this is a Hot Maple show, and I'm joined by Sarah Shah from Board Games in a Minute. Welcome, Sarah.
I
Hello, and before we get started, please do consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll put the link in the description down below for Sarah's channel, Board Games in a Minute, which looks at short board game reviews and other topics and discussions as well. To explain to those who don't watch this particular show, we'll be drawing three questions from this bowl now. These are questions that are hot topics around the internet, and we'll be discussing those in a bit more detail, giving you our thoughts and opinions, and it's strictly that, our subjective opinions on those hot topics. So, shall we get started and drop the first question, Sarah?
Yes.
Okay, let's see what comes out. And first one coming out the bowl. This is quite a long one, actually. Oh, okay. This is an interesting one. So, are supermarkets in some countries still behind when it comes to selling modern board games?
Well, when you say supermarkets, I
So,
guess
well, I suppose for you in America, it'd be Target, places like that. I suppose in the UK, in Europe, it'd be supermarkets or grocery stores, for example, because they don't just sell groceries. There's other items, certain
Mhm.
shopping markets and places
Okay.
you sell. So really, it varies from country to country. So if we start, maybe we'll talk about the US first, because I think that's a good starting place, and then we'll dive into Europe because it's two different ways, and perhaps especially UK and how those sell board games compared to perhaps US and Germany, for example. So we'll start with the US. What are your thoughts in US in terms of those less specialist shops that sell board games? Do you feel that they are modernized enough in terms of what they sell, or perhaps behind the times?
Yeah, I mean, Target doesn't carry as many, I would say, strategy hobby board games as a store like Barnes and Noble, for example. So we have these bookstores called Barnes and Noble. It's a chain of bookstores, and they've started to carry a lot more strategy board games that hobby board gamers would be interested in. Like I'm usually, every time I walk in and I see the board games that they have and the new arrivals, I'm always pleasantly surprised by the board games that they've brought in. Whereas Target is more geared towards mass market and, the general population, so they don't carry as many, like, heavier or even mid-weight strategy games. It's more games that would be considered family friendly, but they are, it's a huge improvement from what it would have been even 10 years ago, like the kinds of games you can find, in Target nowadays. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of YouTube videos where some content creators have gone into stores in the US and, like you say, Barnes and Nobles and Target, and certainly there's a lot more modern games there. So if we compare that to the UK, for example, so we've got specialist board game shops, which is great, and there's a lot more that come out. But we've also got supermarkets, and supermarkets in the UK don't just sell food, they sell all sorts of electrical equipment and board games. Now, usually you find the likes of Monopoly on there and Cluedo and all games like that. They came out in the early 1900s. And unfortunately, you don't find many modern games in the UK when you go to a supermarket. There's quite a lot of tacky games that they still sell, which is quite unfortunate. And you still have to go to the specialist games. Whereas if you go to other parts in Europe, maybe Germany, for example, it's a lot more acceptance in terms of the Euro games you'll find on shelves. If you go to a non-specialist gaming store, for example, you will see more modern games. Not so much in some other countries in Europe. It varies considerably, but certainly I can only speak mostly for the UK because that's where I live, and they're way behind when it comes to that. You have to go to a specialist board game shop. Thankfully, there's enough around. There's plenty online stores as well where you can get your games. And we still have big, giant marketplaces as well online that you can purchase modern board games. So there's still a bit of choice there. It's just unfortunate when I haven't caught up with the US. But you will have, for example, Waterstones, which is a shop, and they do sell modern board games. So at least we've got some aspect of that in certain businesses, but not when it comes to supermarkets.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that they're behind because maybe it just doesn't fit their audience. Maybe they know from a marketing perspective that a hobby board gamer will likely go to a hobby board game store. So they're trying to find games that will cater to a larger audience. So I don't know if it's necessarily that they're behind, they just have a different marketing strategy, I think. And yeah, I visit the UK every year, London every year, and I always go to Foyle's bookstore on Charing Cross Road, and their board game collection is really good as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a good point, and certainly is that their market when you go to a supermarket. I won't name the names, but there's a few giant ones and big businesses, and certainly their market is selling those tacky games, and they sell. So that's the general mass for that audience, and if it works for them, then that's great. It just unfortunately, when I take my children in the see games like that, especially young children, they're going to be drawn to those tacky games, aren't they? Because they like fun. And that's okay. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that because we have to start somewhere. But yeah, it can be a little bit frustrating. Like you say, you have to perhaps go to a coffee store, or perhaps you have to go to Waterstones or somewhere like that, that perhaps is looking at that market of selling more modern games. So it'll be interesting to see what other people think in their country as well. Perhaps if there's someone from a few other different European countries and what they see in their shops and supermarkets and grocery stores. So it'll be interesting if people want to comment them below. So shall we bring out the next question, Sarah?
Yes.
See what comes out. So for a second question, are second-hand board games selling for too much?
Oh gosh. That's a good question. I don't know. Um, hmm, are they selling
I've
for
got, I've
too
got a
much?
strong point in this.
I
And
think well, I don't know if they're selling for too much, but the sellers obviously want to recoup their costs. And I guess if you're selling it, if it's used and you're selling it at the same price that you bought it at, then yes, you're selling it for too much. But if it's a collector's edition or a rare board game or an out of print game, then that's understandable that you would sell it for as much as maybe you paid for it or even more. Um, but if it's a game that's readily available and you're selling it like at, the same price that you bought it at, like first of all, I don't know if like anyone would actually buy it from you then when they can just buy a new copy instead. I don't know. I don't know. I'll hear your thoughts and then maybe I'll have something to add.
yeah, some good points there. So there's one way to look at it as the value. What does someone value that game at? And that's quite important. Like you say, if it's a collector's or it's out of print, obviously the value goes up because the demand is there, isn't it? Um, when I often see, and I often do not buy games secondhand for the reason being I feel the cost is way too much. I'd rather spend that extra £5 or £10 to then get a new game. So why would I spend? I know I just don't understand some of the prices, and some of them are ridiculously high. And I think I can get the game, like you said, at exactly the same price, brand new. So why would I waste my money to get it secondhand? It just doesn't make sense to me. I feel that some of the perceptions and the cost is a little bit too high in terms of what people are asking for. I get a bit furious with it because I think, why on earth are you selling your games at that price? I understand you've got to cover the PayPal cost. I understand you've got to cover your postage costs as well. But I feel that if I can spend an extra £5 and get the game brand new, I'm spending an extra £5 and getting it brand new. So at least I know it's not been opened. I understand that the vast majority of people look after the games, and most of them are in immaculate condition, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great. And I suppose when you add the value to it, is it worth the price you're paying? And also you've got to take into account how long is it going to take. So recently I just purchased On Mars, and it's a Kickstarter version. And the reason why I got it is because it was in immaculate condition. It only been played a handful of times. There's nothing wrong with it. It's more or less the same price as what I would get if I tried to find if I could find it, the Kickstarter version in the UK, which I can't. So I thought, well, I'll get the Kickstarter version because it's quite rare to try and find that for on Mars. Now it was taking about 2 weeks for it to come, but I'm not going to get that at all in the UK for that price. So I could justify paying the cost of that. And plus, it's a Kickstarter, so I'm getting all the perks and I know what comes with it because I can check it beforehand. So there are some justifications for buying secondhand games, although I do feel the cost is way too much because I've got a perception if it's secondhand, it should be half the price of what you paid for it because it's secondhand. I know not everyone sees it, it's like that, but that's the way I see it. So I tend to stay clear of secondhand games and I pay that extra small cost to get it brand new.
Yeah, no, that's understandable, but, like, for example, I had an experience recently where backed a deluxe version of a board game on Kickstarter, and I played it once, and I was just so disappointed by this game, and now I'm upset, about how much money I spent on it. Do I wanna sell it for half of what I paid for it? No, I wanna try to get more out of it because of how much money I spent on it. But at the same time, it's like, as you said, if I'm gonna sell it for near the price that I paid for it, then just spend the extra 5 or £10 or dollars and get the brand new copy instead that for, a fact will not be missing anything, have no issues. I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah, I'm all for games being recycled. I think it's important. Find a good home and to get some plays out of it. I think that's important. Right, just sitting on the shelf and collecting dust. I don't agree with that. So it's about try and get rid of your games. So try and recycle them. To give it a good home. I'm all for that. I just feel like some of the prices are too much for what people are asking for at times. I understand, like you say, if it's a deluxe or a Kickstarter, I can understand justifying the near to the price they paid for it because if the game is immaculate condition, obviously you want to try and get your money back. I completely get that and I have no problems with that. But when a game's been played 15, 20 times, you're then selling it for near the full price you paid for it. I just can't justify the rationale behind asking for that much money.
Yeah, for sure. I understand. And you brought up another good point. Like, if no one's going to buy the game at near full price, then it's just going to sit on my shelf collecting dust then. So at that point, you're right. I should probably consider selling it for half of what I paid for it so I can at least get something back rather than it just sitting unplayed on my shelf for an eternity. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll be interested to see what other people's thoughts on that, especially those who buy a lot of secondhand board games. Now, I sell quite a few, but I always sell them fairly cheaper than what you can buy, and always get these comments of, "Oh, that's cheap. This will be sold straight away." So yeah, because I don't agree with paying and asking for a ridiculous amount of money for it when you just can't justify it. So people have got different thoughts and how they value a secondhand game, and which is perfectly fine. But I do feel that some of the prices, especially what I see on these marketplaces, are asking for way too much than what they're worth. But that's just my opinion. Be interesting to see what others think about it. So shall we bring out our final question, Sarah?
Yes.
See what about the bowl. So our final question is, will legacy games soon come to a halt?
Wow, I am the last person who should be talking about this because I do not play legacy or campaign games. I just have an aversion to them. I don't want to play something because, like, when I play a board game, I want an experience that's one and done. Like, I want to play a board game and then be done with it. And then if I love it again, love it so much and I want to play it again, great. But I don't want something that's going to last over weeks or months and, where you have to destroy components. Like, that just would hurt me a lot to rip up a board game component. So I just do not play campaign or legacy games at all. So I don't know if I have anything to add. They just don't appeal to me in any shape or form.
Yeah, I can understand if someone's got OCD and extreme version, when they rip it up, or I can understand it's not for everyone that experience because it can last weeks, like you say, and even months. You could be playing up to 20 times, couldn't you, the same game? And you have to invest that time, which is quite difficult for a lot of people. Now, I've got a few legacy games. I've played Pandemic Legacy. I actually loved that. I thought it was a great experience. I liked the game. And I think that was a good journey. And yeah, it really depends on the people you play with as well. I know it takes a lot of time and effort for these designers to be putting a legacy game out. And I know that the amount of time it takes, they could have perhaps designed two or three other board games by the amount of time and money they've invested in that legacy game. So, will it come to a halt? I'm not sure it will. I think there'll be a period and a time where we won't see legacy games coming out, or perhaps it might be one every few years it comes out. So I think there'll be kind of troughs in these kind of styles where you'll see, like we had lots of legacy games coming at one time, and now there's maybe only one or two a year. And then eventually there won't be any for a few years, and then there might be one or two come along. So I think we'll see that. I don't think they'll completely stop, but I think because of the time it takes, it's whether the designer wants to invest that time, isn't it, to design those legacy games. And is there a market for that type of legacy game as well? Because not every game is suitable for turning into legacy games. So it's important as well as finding the right type of game to make it a legacy game and whether that designer wants to invest that time.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what percentage of hobby board gamers actually play legacy board games, because that might inform a designer or publisher's decision about whether or not they want to create a legacy game as well. Whether it's worth their time and money and effort to create one. So, I'd be curious about that. I wonder if there's any research done on that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting as well how many children actually play legacy games. Also, is well the ones that are more accessible, like Charterstone, Pandemic. Because I think it's a great experience for children to get involved in that journey because that's what that mysteriousness, what's behind that box, what's in that, what happens when we rip that card up? We have to put a sticker. Okay, what sticker do I select? So I think it'd be interesting to see how many children actually play legacy games because I think it'd be a great experience for them. And that's what it is an experience, isn't it? It's that journey, that experience as a one-off. And like you say, a lot of people don't ripping things up and destroying. But I don't mind it as long as you're okay with that and you're comfortable with it and you accept that that's what's going to happen. Then I think you can enjoy it. I think it can be a great experience. But like you say, can you invest that time? That's a lot of time to invest.
Mm.
With Pandemic is an example, 12 seasons. So, but you don't win every single season. So you could be playing it 14, 16 times. And do you have the people to sit down and play 14, 16 times? That's a big ask.
Yeah, not only that, tying it back to the last question, like a legacy game is not something you can sell secondhand, right? Because components have been destroyed. So, depending on the cost, you'd have to consider, are you willing to pay this much for something that you know you cannot sell if you don't like it and you've already destroyed some components, then what? So, I don't know.
Yeah, and another way to think about it, how much would it cost you to have a night out? Versus how many experiences you're getting with that legacy game to the cost you put into it. So there's another way of looking at it and whether somebody values it that enough to invest that money and that time. So, and also I think it's a good way to have that experience with friends and others and build up rapport with perhaps with others in a gaming group you haven't known for that long and you're investing that time because you have to invest that time. So it can have positives out of it, but also it can have negatives as well because it's a long process. And sometimes it can be a little bit tedious for some people and might not be enough change in the game over the time. So it really depends. Everyone's got a different perspective on it. I enjoy them. I think it's a great experience, a one-off. I don't mind ripping a few things up and I don't mind that at all, as long as I've got the experience. And a lot of it depends on the people you play with and whether they can commit to that or not. So that brings us to the end, Sarah, and I think and some interesting questions. It'd be really helpful to find out from the viewers whether they've got an opinion on any of these. And I'll put the link in the description down below so they can check out your channel. And if you haven't already done so, please do consider subscribing to the channel and giving this video a like. So that brings us to the end. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'd like to thank our guest, Sarah Shav from Board Games in a Minute for joining me. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Until next time, take care.
This is Bonkers.